Well, everybody, hopefully we'll learn the prayer together. And now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. There are 4 corners to my bed. There are 4 angels overhead, 1 to watch, 1 to pray, 2 to lead my soul away. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lay on. And we have been studying the Gospel of Mark. Today we're in the 6th chapter. To remind you again, Mark's Gospel is written like a 2-act play. This is the Gospel. Just a second now, don't go away. It starts with the beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So we're learning about a man named Jesus, who is the Christ, the Anointed One. And who is he really? He's the Son of God. And the first 5 chapters so far, we're introduced to Jesus, the miracle worker. He goes about his world at the time and he cures the lepers. He heals the paralytics. He casts out devils. He opens the eyes of the blind, the ears of the deaf. He cures a man with palsy or something of that nature. He gathers around him disciples. And all the time the question is arising inside of us, who is he really? And then he goes on to calm the storm. Who do you know that can lift up his hand and say, quiet now, be calm? And the wind drops down and the sea is calm. And who do you know who can cast out a legion of devils? And so the question keeps arising, who is this Jesus really? And I'm asking you at this moment, who is Jesus? Who do you say that he is? And then this beautiful story about the man possessed by a legion of demons. And right after it, there's a story of a woman with a hemorrhage of blood, suffered for 12 or 18 years. And even by touching the hem of Jesus's garment, she is made well. And shortly after that, there's another touch. Jesus reaches out and touches the hand of a little girl and brings her back from the dead. So the question, who is this Jesus really? Later on in this gospel, you're going to hear Jesus asking the question himself. He'll say to the 12, who do men say that I am? And they gave him all kinds of answers. Like some people say you're John the Baptist. Other people say that you're Elijah. But Jesus says, I know all that, but who do you say that I am? So today then we're in the 6th chapter. Jesus goes back to Nazareth, where he grew up. Not Bethlehem, but Nazareth. What did he do for many of those years? To the best of our knowledge, we know that he worked at the trade of a carpenter. Because later on, when people are discussing Jesus rather heavily, they say, is this not Jesus, the carpenter's son? That's what they were used to. And they were shocked then when he began to preach and teach and raise the dead to life. So he goes back to his native district. Going from that district, he went to his hometown, and his disciples accompanied him. With the coming of the Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and most of them were astonished when they heard him. They said, where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been granted him, and these miracles that are worked through him? This is the carpenter, surely the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Jude and Simon. His sisters too, are they not here with us? And they would not accept him. The great block that comes. Now you know about Jesus and the miracles. Well, do you accept him? And Jesus said to them, A prophet is only despised in his own country, among his own relations, and in his own house. And he could work no miracle there, though he cured a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Isn't it interesting to see that he could work no miracle there? And we're talking about the all-powerful Word made flesh. We're talking about Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Son of God, Jesus who rose from the dead. But in his native place, he could work no miracle there because of their lack of faith. He sends out the 12. It must have been interesting. Then he summoned the 12 and began to send them out in pairs, giving them authority over the unclean spirits. Now, I'm one of those who has been sent out by Christ and given the authority to forgive sins and to cast out demons. And Jesus equips his apostles in this manner. The word apostle means one who is sent. A disciple is one who is learning. You're learning the discipline of the Lord. What the apostle is one who is sent. And then he instructed them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no haversack, no coppers for their purses. So their only food is to be himself, I think, is what he's saying to them. They were to wear sandals, but added, do not take a spare tunic. And he said to them, if you enter a house anywhere, stay there until you leave the district. And if any place does not welcome you, and people refuse to listen to you, as you walk away, shake off the dust from under your feet as a sign to them. So they set off to preach repentance, and they cast out many devils and anointed many sick people with oil and cured them. And that's what the church is meant to be about in our time. Preaching the gospel, preaching repentance, casting out devils, and anointing many sick people. And we're not to be too concerned whether they're cured or not. That's up to the Lord. I've seen people who were anointed with oil, and the prayer of the sick was prayed over them, and it seemed like nothing happened. But maybe something did. They learned inside themselves to accept their sicknesses as a cross. Others, the healing was given later on. I've shared with you about somebody who had throat cancer, and they were anointed and blessed. And 2 years later, they told me about it, because it had nothing to do with me to begin with, so why bother telling me? Now, he's so well known at this stage that he comes to the eye of the authorities, Herod. Meanwhile, King Herod heard about him, since by now his name was well known. Some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. Others, he is Elijah from the Old Testament. Others again, he's the prophet, like the prophets we used to have. But when Herod heard this, he said, it is John whose head I cut off. He is risen from the dead. In Herod's part, it was probably wishful thinking. Herod, even though he was a very bad man, liked John the Baptist, liked to hear him preach. And at the prompting of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married, he had John beheaded. So he's probably suffering from nightmares about the killing of John the Baptist. So his conclusion, probably wishful thinking on his part, that this Jesus is actually John the Baptist risen from the dead. And who could blame him? Now, it was the same Herod who had sent to have John arrested and had him chained up in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. But John had told Herod, it is against the law for you to have your brother's wife. As for Herodias, she was furious with him and wanted to kill him, and she was not able to. So there was a condition then came up where Herodias' daughter did some type of an extraordinary dance. We who have bad minds think of it as the dance of the seven veils. We really don't know. But it stimulated the guests and Herod in his foolishness said to her when the dance was done, I'm so pleased with you, I'll give you up to half my kingdom. And he made his promise in the presence of his courtiers and all his noble people, if there were any. And of course, at the prompting of Herodias, the daughter asked for the head of John the Baptist. I think of St. Thomas More, you know, in The Man for All Seasons, at the end of the play, it ends up with, "Behold the head of a traitor." Well, John the Baptist, his head cut off. Jesus' ministry is beginning to change. He feeds 5,000 in the wilderness. Well, let's see the details here. The apostles rejoined Jesus and told him all they had done and taught, and he said to them, "You must come away to some lonely place all by yourselves and rest a while." For they were coming and going, but so many were coming and going that the apostles had no time even to eat. Now, Jesus began to crowds like 5,000, like 7,000 were showing up, and how are we going to feed them? So it says, there was somebody there who had 5 loaves and 2 fish. So raising his eyes to heaven, Jesus said the blessing. Kind of reminds you that further on at the Last Supper, he will raise his eyes to heaven over the bread and wine. Then he broke the loaves and handed them to the disciples to distribute among the people. He also shared out the 2 fish among them all. They all ate as much as they wanted. They collected 12 baskets of scraps of bread and pieces of fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. At this stage, we should begin to be thinking about Moses. Moses fed the multitude in the desert. So is Jesus the new Moses? He gives us not the 10 Commandments, but he gives us the law, the gospel message, the Beatitudes, the love our enemies part of it, and he feeds them. The new Moses? Who is this Jesus really? After that, showing that he is greater than Moses, he walked on water. Now we'll finish with this. Directly after the feeding of the thousands, etc., he made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to Bethsaida, while he himself sent the crowd away. After saying goodbye to them, he went off into the hills to pray. Moses went up to the mountain, he went into the hills. When evening came, the boat was far out on the lake, and he was alone on the shore. He could see they were worn out from rowing, for the wind was against them. And the wind is against us who live here today in the modern world. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came towards them, walking on the lake. He was going to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they had all seen him and were terrified. But he also spoke to them and said, "Courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." And he's saying the same to us. Do not be afraid. It is I. I'm always with you, all days till the end of the world. Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind dropped. They were utterly and completely dumbfounded, because they had not seen what the miracle of the loaves meant, that Jesus was the new Moses. Their minds were closed. After all that, miracles, raising the dead to life, preaching the gospel, they don't know who he is. Their minds are closed. Amen.